Have you ever seen a meme so bad that you decide to make a video ranting about it?
Your memes are bad and you should feel bad.
Hello, shitlords and shitladies. I didn't plan to make this video. I just happened to see a really bad meme made by a former shitlord, who is now spouting the same talking points as SJWs he used to fight against. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The similarities don't end here. He also deleted his old videos and changed the name of his channel, as if to distance himself from his prior self. Funny enough, his banner still says SeñorMiniBagel. At least Spino was more thorough and had more attention to details. But we aren't here for the YouTube channel. Our primary interest is the meme he made, and everything that's wrong with it.
I'm not a conservative, I'm a classical liberal, whatever the fuck that is.
Really? Can't tell if this was supposed to imply that people calling themselves classical liberals have no idea what it means, or it's Mr. Bagel admitting his ignorance on the subject. Either way, it makes very little sense. Classical liberalism is pretty well defined. Could have gone to Wikipedia, the article there is okay, or you could have googled, DuckDuckWent? Anyways, you could have searched for it on the net. There are plenty of decent articles explaining it. In short, classical liberalism is what liberalism used to be before it was corrupted by socialism and other SJW shit. You know, free market, equality before the law, freedom of expression, the right to practice any religion or no religion whatsoever, all that good shit. If you compare that to the beliefs of people who call themselves liberals these days, you'll see that they have very little in common. Hence the classical part, to differentiate. And yes, you can't equivocate classical liberalism with conservatism, mainly because conservatism is context-dependent. Generally speaking, conservatives seek to preserve the current ways of society, and obviously those will be different depending on where you look.
Did you just call him a racist?
Well, this phrase, devoid of all context, is pretty much meaningless. Who called whom a racist? A lot of people got called a racist for no good reason, but a lot of people accused of racism totally deserved it. Next.
Free speech means that if someone has a super unpopular idea like white nationalism, anyone who criticizes them is an SJW. Checkmate. Leftist.
Wow. This is quite an impressive strawman you've built there, senor. There's so much wrong with it that I'll need to unwrap it layer by layer. First of all, since you said that white nationalism is super unpopular, then there's no need to worry about it. It's not a big deal if only a small handful of people support it, right? Next, not a single person who can breathe a synapse once in a while has ever said that freedom of speech means calling people SJWs for criticizing unpopular ideas. Well, I guess that the right to call people SJWs is implicitly included in freedom of speech. But that's not what you were going for here. Free speech defends the right to express unpopular opinions, as well as the right to criticize them. The problem with SJWs isn't that they criticize, but rather that they try to silence the ideas they disapprove of. And lastly, many ideas that we take for granted today used to be very unpopular. Heliocentric model of the solar system, secular democracy, freedom of and from religion, etc. Freedom of speech isn't there to protect the right to express things that are popular and socially acceptable. After all, there is no danger in saying something that everyone agrees with. It's there to protect the right to be a contrarian.
Formal education is indoctrination, so I get all my knowledge from YouTubers.
Another strawman. Nice. Nobody worth listening to claims that all formal education is indoctrination. Geometry, chemistry, or English grammar are more or less unaffected by ideologies. It's when we get to history or sociology do we see blatant brainwashing. Critical theory, whiteness studies, applied privilege geometry, trigger warnology, etc. Are you telling me that all this shit is anything but indoctrination? Fucking really? As for YouTubers, I don't understand why you dismiss the idea of learning from them. After all, a video is just a medium. It's not that different from a lecture, except that you are not in the same room as the person who is lecturing you. For example, I've learned a lot about electronics from YouTube videos made by people with decades of experience in the field. There are channels devoted to other areas, chemistry, physics, engineering, etc. Sure, it's not a substitute for a proper education, but you can learn a lot from those.
Did you know blacks are 22 million times more likely to commit crimes as whites?
Terrible grammar and cringeworthy hyperbole aside, what exactly is wrong with admitting that certain demographics are more likely to break the law? It's a sad state of affairs, But the only way to change it is to admit that there's a problem, study it, and hopefully come up with a solution. No, not that kind of a solution. You are not doing anyone any favors by pretending that the issue doesn't exist, and by shaming those who bring it up.
I used to like The Amazing Atheist, but then he became an SJW.
And what is wrong with saying this, pray tell? Yeah, sure, calling him an outright SJW might be an exaggeration, but some of the things he had said are venturing in the SJW territory, for sure. Plus, there was all that candid stuff, not SJW related, but pretty damaging to his reputation. So that was the meme, and it was all sorts of stupid. I don't know what's worse. The fact that SeñorMiniBagel erected such a huge gender non-specific straw person, or that he didn't even bother to knock it down. Being unable to win a fight against a straw dummy of your own making, that's almost impressive. Having said that, this whole ordeal on its own probably wouldn't deserve a video. But it's not an isolated incident. This situation, where a left-leaning anti-SJW suddenly has a change of heart and proceeds to defend the very things he fought against, is a pretty common one these days. Despite what you might think, I don't actually hate the left or all leftists. Hell, I used to be one not that long ago. Moreover, even though the left these days has become an amalgamation of really bad ideas and really bad practices, I don't want it completely destroyed. I'd much rather see it reformed, set free from the shackles of Marxism and postmodernism, two cancerous growths that have been killing it for decades. It would make sense that antis on the left would have the same sentiment, but reality doesn't seem to conform to these expectations. The following is my theory about why does it happen. It's based on little more than mere speculations, so take it with a grain of salt. Nevertheless, I think it explains what we see pretty well. Imagine a left-leaning shitlord. He lived his life blissfully unaware of SJWs, until one day they tried to take over something he held dear, a hobby for example. Naturally, he decided to push back. However, the more he got involved into the ongoing culture war, the more he realized that the rabbit hole goes deeper than he could have imagined. Just a matter of time until he realizes, either consciously or subconsciously, that his enemies were created by the same ideology that he adopted and made a part of his very identity. At first he can ignore it. Cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug. But mental gymnastics only go so far. When the paradigm shift that you yourself helped create is threatening to lay waste to your own worldview, it's impossible not to notice it. He has two choices. Either adjust his views, and by doing so alter his identity, or choose to defend his ideology even if that requires to abandon his principles. There's a YouTuber by the name Anti-Citizen-X. If you aren't familiar with him, I highly recommend you take a look at his catalog of videos, especially his Psychology of Belief series. It's primarily about religious beliefs, but pretty much every phenomenon explained there is applicable to ideologies. Here's a fragment of the episode called Self-Serving Bias.
If I were to ask you to define yourself, how would you do it? What personal traits come to mind? Would you talk about the place where you were born or the experiences from your childhood? Would you reference your ethnicity and your nationality? Maybe your education and personal accomplishments? Or perhaps food, music, and entertainment you enjoy? These are all perfectly natural and healthy ways to identify yourself in a normal social environment. But what happens when people begin to define their very identity in terms of personal beliefs and convictions? Is this a healthy way to view ourselves? What happens to our rational objectivity when physical evidence contradicts those beliefs? Human beings have a strong natural tendency to interpret information in such a way as to unduly favor their egos. As a result, subjects tend to reject perfectly viable information simply because it has negative implications for their personal beliefs and behaviors. Likewise, subjects will tend to eagerly accept information with positive implications, even if that information happens to be flawed or inconclusive. In extreme cases, it will even lead to a sort of backfire effect, where contradictory evidence merely reinforces self-serving beliefs rather than break them down. This effect is so strong, in fact, that it can actually overpower other ubiquitous biases like belief perseverance. Cognitive bias is already bad enough even under the most ideal conditions, but now we're talking about something that defines the very essence of who these people are. It makes no difference how rational of an argument you can make when the conclusion itself represents a direct blow to the cultural identity of the recipient. So, the next time you find yourself in an intense debate over the external reality of someone's spiritual beliefs, remember, religion is a defining feature of who many people are. When those beliefs are threatened, the natural psychological reaction is to cling to any excuse that maintains a positive self-identity. Even if you're right, even if you have absolutely perfect epistemic justification for your position on God, atheism, or evolution, believers will rarely bow to the dictates of cold, hard logic.
I think this pretty much explains why so many leftists on our side choose to become turncoats, even that only harms them or their ideology. Instead of working towards reforming the left, or even tearing it down so it can be rebuilt, they choose to blindly defend it in its current state, the state it will not be able to recover from. Sad as it may be, I am actually glad that these people finally show their true colors. By demonstrating that they prefer partisanship over principles, blind devotion over skepticism, and emotion over reason, they make it clear that they are not to be trusted. In the grand scheme of things, their betrayal won't accomplish much. The only difference it makes is that when the dust settles, we shall have more rubble to clean up.
The avalanche has already started. It is too late for the pebbles to vote.
Thanks for making it through the video. I'd like to thank YouTube user ThePapino134 for lending me his voice for reading the meme contents. Check out his channel, link in the description. To differentiate might be an not SJW related, but pretty jammed. Might be an